manufacturing industry. There's a lot of rapid technological change. Of course, there's workforce demographic shifts and international trade challenges, and the industry is evolving in a lot of ways to meet those challenges. That's what we're going to try to explore today. So what I'm going to have you do is each go down the line, just introduce yourself briefly, and then Joe will have you start things off. So David?
Well, good afternoon. My name is Dave Zrostlik. I'm president of Stellar Industries, located in Garner, Iowa. We're about a 500 employee company, partial ESOP, and we manufacture commercial trucks for the mechanic industry, for commercial tire, for the refuse industry. We've been in business for 29 years, and a growing company. We've added about 100 employees plus in the last year and a half, and we're looking for more, and that's part of one of the challenges we'll be talking about.
Hi, I'm Mike Ralston. I'm with the Iowa Association of Business and Industry. Some of you in the room are very closely involved with our organization. We're grateful for that. ABI is Iowa's oldest and largest statewide business organization. It is 116 years old this year. We have about 1,500 member companies, heavily manufacturing centric, because for about 85 years of that 116, ABI was the Iowa Manufacturers Association, but now we represent businesses of all kinds. Dave didn't mention it, but he's a past chairman of the board at our organization. His company's innovative and growing and exciting to talk about. So just so you know the way it goes today, this is a terrific panel. I'm not really part of that, though. So, go ahead, Kelly.
Hi, I'm Kelli Gallagher. I'm president of DeeZee Manufacturing. We currently have almost 1,200 employees in the Des Moines area. We are a manufacturer of automobile accessories, primarily crossbars, roof rails, and running boards. And we've been in business since 1977.
Hi, I'm Bill Adamowski. I'm the president of the ISU Startup Factory over at Iowa State. So the ISU Startup Factory, I don't know if you've heard of, started it 3 years ago, and we're a startup accelerator. Basically, it's a 52-week accelerator program open to, obviously, university folks, but also to the community at large. In the last 3 years, we've had 100 startups go through. They've raised over $25 million in venture financing, so doing pretty well, but it's all about innovation and startups for me.
Hi, I'm Robin Anderson. I'm a senior economist with Principal Financial Group. On the asset management side, I look at economic trends, whether it's the U.S. or global.
All right, Joe, why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
All right. Well, thank you again to our panelists. I know that there are 1,000,001 things that you could probably be doing otherwise this afternoon, so we appreciate the time. And our first question, what from your perspectives what is the biggest challenge or disruptor that Iowa manufacturers will face over the next 5 years or so?
I would say it's probably labor shortages. The unemployment rate in Iowa is 2.4%. It's the third lowest in the nation. If you look at what metropolitan area in the United States has the lowest unemployment rate, it's Ames, Iowa, with, I believe, an unemployment rate of 1.4%. Iowa City, Dubuque, Des Moines are also in the bottom 10. And if you look at the Midwest in particular, there would be 180,000 unfilled positions if everyone in the Midwest who was unemployed got a job. If you look at Iowa, there are 40,000 unemployed Iowans, but according to the Iowa Workforce Development, the current state job site has 64,000 job openings. And if you look at manufacturing in particular, this is a study from Deloitte. There could be 2.4, this is a U.S. statistic, not an Iowa statistic, there could be 2.4 million manufacturing jobs left unfilled nationally as baby boomers retire and skill gaps lead to shortages. So I'd say definitely not enough people to fill the jobs.
Sure. So Joe asked us to be sometimes a little more controversial or throw out different topics. So labor is obviously a huge piece, right? But one of the things that I want to spur some thought in everybody is to think about, so if one of our greatest competitors in manufacturing is China, right? How many people think China's sitting there going, workforce is probably our biggest challenge, right? How many think they're sitting there going, training our employees and safety of our employees, which is obviously a huge thing for us, right? Is it a priority for China? Right? So what are they investing in? right? So they're probably investing in advanced technologies, trying to move forward. So when you start thinking about it, I mean, go to that Gretzky quote where, don't go to where the puck is, go to where the puck's going, right? So if that's our chief competitor and they're investing in advanced technologies and innovation, we need to absolutely take care of our labor shortage, right? Or well, you can't play in the game if you don't have that. But realize that to be competitive, we need to start thinking beyond some of that as well, right? So that would be my biggest disruptor, would be our ability to adopt really advanced technologies in the manufacturing sector fast enough to be competitive in the global marketplace.
I would agree that the labor shortage has been impacting our business for the last 3 to 5 years, but also the challenges of late with the increase in the tariffs on different components that we utilize, because our customers, which is 85% of our business is OEM, they are looking to the future and they are making their vehicle platforms global styling. And so there is a big push to localize some of the components, and so the tariffs are having a major impact also.
You guys are all smart, because I agree with everything you said. Certainly, technology is something that's going to be a disruptor. Trade and tariffs is a disruptor right now. When you think about technology and automation, too many times I hear people talk about the negative impact that'll have on the workforce. And let me tell you, it won't have a negative impact, because people don't have enough in their workforce. They need more people. So if they get technology or they automate a process or a certain line, that just allows those people to do something else that's probably of a higher value in the chain anyway. So that's what we need. Before I give this to Dave, I got to say I've already screwed up, because one of the first things I wanted to say is we value our partnership with the Business Record a great deal. They do terrific work here, and the focus they put on manufacturing, and they've done it for years, is important to this community and this state, and so we don't take that for granted. Thanks very much for all you guys do.
Some of the topics that are important to us at Stellar Industries are kind of already been mentioned. Being in rural Iowa, definitely labor is a big concern of ours. When we started the company 29 years ago, we seemed like we had a lot of people that grew up on the farm, knowing how to tinker with tractors and using a piece of twine and wire to make things work. As family farms have dissipated, that workforce has dissipated as well. And we just don't have those people that are coming off the farms that have those skills. And the people that are coming off farms, they're going to Iowa State, getting a 4-year degree, and going back to run those farms, which are now corporations. So they're not coming to work for manufacturing companies like ours. So it's one of the penalties I think we have being in rural Iowa, is that we don't have a big draw to bring people to our part of the state. But it's also a benefit of being in rural Iowa, because we do have a very dedicated workforce, people that have experience that can come do things for us. As we see retirement start to happen, it's going to be difficulty having people come in and fill those positions as they come back in. So we are looking at more and more technology to take our place. Tariffs have been a big issue for us recently. Last year we saw our aluminum and steel prices go up 35%. So for our domestic markets, we try to not pass that along. We try to eat as much of that as possible. We increase our efficiency and our productivity in our factory to help dissipate some of that increase. But when you've got tariffs being felt here in the United States and not being felt by our foreign competitors, that just gave our foreign competitors bringing finished products that compete with ours a leg up on our products, or more of an equalization with our products, and then try and take our products and export those to countries around the world where we export to Russia, China, Australia, South Africa. Now all of a sudden our products became much more expensive. So tariffs are definitely not a way to go, and we'd like to see those things go away.
I'm going to follow up on that. That's all right, Joe. It's interesting, Dave, and Kelly, you two, we talk about tariffs and trade at ABI. We do a lot of surveying members and talking to members all the time, and if you talk to an ABI manufacturing member, they'll echo what Dave has said, and then we'll try to probe a little further. We'll say, well, so how do you feel about what the president's trying to do? And they'll say, well, we get what the administration's trying to do, and we support that, and we just don't like tariffs, and of course as an organization we don't either. And then we'll follow up with the final question and say, well, when do they have to come off? When is it? So far everybody seems to say we don't like it at all, we want them off, but okay, we're willing to go along. So then we say, when do they have to come off? And they always answer, well, we don't know, but we'll know it when we see it. So I don't know what that means, but nobody likes them, but they're willing to go along for a while yet.
So is it fair to say that for manufacturers like yourselves, um, there's short-term hurt and there doesn't seem to be a long-term or a long-term look to shift production like the theory goes that if you can shift production to the United States, that this will cure the problem, or is that just too simplistic a solution?
I think what we're partly saying is we've got a reprieve area right here where the rest of the world, where we don't export a lot, but the people we do export to, it'll take some time for them to find different markets to source those products from. So in that regard, yeah, it'd be good to have those tariffs go away as quickly as possible. As far as our steel tariff, we've had some reprieve in steel costs so far this year, nothing like the increase we saw last year. So the competitors are bringing in product primarily from Europe and from, in our markets, Europe, I guess. They're still having a very good year right now with the dollar versus euro being favorable to them, and our steel cost is causing our prices to go up. So we'd like to see that get back to an equalized position as far as our competition as well.
I wonder if anyone in the audience has some thoughts along these lines regarding either tariffs or workforce, which also seems to be a predominant issue. Anyone willing to take that first question or first? Yes.
We participate in a thing called Manufacturing Day that happens every October. In that, I think this will be our third year participating. It brings students from high schools and colleges to our facility, gives them a tour. Last year, we have a toolbox that is a DIY bolt-together toolbox. So we had each one of these student groups build that toolbox as the project while they were on site. The labor shortage or the lack of skilled labor is causing manufacturers to have to train from within or work with the community colleges as well as recruits. We also do some training for our leadership with some other manufacturers in the central Iowa area where we each send a group and they all participate in some of the training. So I think the days are gone of being able to hire somebody with some of those skill sets fresh out of high school or a community college, but investing in that employee and training them on site with your products is beneficial.
Curdy, if you go to elevateiowa.com, you'll see our Elevate program that Chris mentioned earlier, and it's really a partnership with Iowa's community colleges and four-year institutions to train young people, but also there's a segment that gets young people into facilities, high schools included. I don't know of a manufacturer that's involved in our organization that doesn't want to get those students and their parents into their facility because they'll take them right now. So maybe we should talk, and we'll see if we can't help you get those kids placed sometime.
At Stellar Industries, we actually have on-site training. So anybody comes to us that wants to weld, if they've ever welded before in their life, or if they've been a lifetime welder, they go through our welding institute. So it's a 3-day classroom and as many days as required in the weld lab to meet our welding standards. They come out of there, they're going to be AWS certified, and they can take that certification anywhere they want to go, but hopefully they're going to stay at Stellar. You know, we place a lot of value on welding. We weld a lot of heavy metals in our company. We have one of the only air-conditioned weld shops around the area. So last week, that was very important to those people. And we also started, just about a year and a half ago, started an internal assembly trainer. So where we put our equipment on the truck chassis, it takes a lot of mechanical skill. And, we just assumed, there's kids that tinker with cars. Well, they tinker with cars anymore. You have to plug in a computer. You don't know how to bolt things together and do things like that anymore. So even finding mechanics to come and work has been a challenge. So we're addressing that and starting to do that training in-house as well. So yes, we would appreciate any high school kid that wants to come work and show up every day. That'd be great.
So I'm on the board of a couple of manufacturing companies, one large and actually one small. And so one of the things that we talk about is obviously the labor part, but the key is there's a lot of resources out there that we should all reach out for, right? And so community colleges, a couple of our operations are out, in rural areas. Community college has been sort of a lifeline for what they do, and then they actually sponsor a lot of things at the community college, get more involved, because the whole idea is if you can get to the students earlier, your chance of actually recruiting them into is higher, right? And then engineers going to somewhere like Iowa State, which has a large engineering college, and once again, trying to bring them in as interns, right? So the internships are huge, and a lot of them go from interns to actually being able to go into more rural areas because they actually like the environment, like the people, right? As opposed to showing up on career day and saying, please move out to Sumner, Iowa, right? I mean, that's a tougher sell than to sit there and say, you get to work on this cool stuff, they're comfortable, they get a good salary. It's a whole different sales pitch. So to me, leverage those different resources, because we've had to become a lot more creative and much more proactive in a lot of it to actually recruit those people.
I imagine, every industry is challenged for workers right now, up and down the board, and so I imagine that creates additional pressure. What do you think manufacturing as an industry would be championing in order to compete for some of those jobs in comparison to some other industries? Maybe Mike, that might be a good opportunity for you.
Well, I think you find in most places, Chris, that manufacturers lead the pay and benefit scale. They're the best paid jobs with the best benefits, but that's sometimes not enough anymore. So they've got to be very creative on things like work shifts. Instead of an 8-hour day, maybe it's a split 4-hour, maybe it's all sorts of different things. I even learned of a couple companies. I was in Northwest Iowa this week, and they're sharing workers back and forth between the two companies. I'd never heard of that before. But I think all Iowa businesses, as you pointed out, are getting very creative, but manufacturers in particular are really trying to do whatever it takes to make that job meaningful and convenient for that worker.
I'm curious whether any of the Future Ready Iowa initiatives that have been going forth, what the experience has been with perhaps some of those programs. I'm thinking of the workforce conference held several months ago, and there was a demonstration and discussion about the work-based learning clearinghouse. Anyone involved in that, and any thoughts on that?
Well, we really believe the governor and General Assembly hit a home run with the Future Ready Iowa initiative. And Joe, it's done a lot of things. The work-based learning initiative has been a big part of that. Dave and I were in the governor's office a year ago when we formally joined that coalition, and you'll find a lot of students already in work-based opportunities and manufacturers across Iowa. But the good news for Iowa is that the Future Ready Iowa thing's been very much a bipartisan initiative. And, we always think at ABI, if you're going to spend money, spend it on people, get them trained. That's a big part of Future Ready Iowa. The governor did hosted that conference that you're talking about, Joe. But boy, the governor and her staff through Iowa Workforce Development have developed a series of smaller seminars and forums that they're taking out on the road all over Iowa this late summer, early fall, and it's going to be a terrific thing. It'll take these resources to the places that need them, and we think that's going to be a good thing for Iowa, too.
Yeah, Catherine.
I would like to know what you think Iowa should do when it comes to taxes and helping us manufacturers. Or just the business environment in general, help run.
As far as the business environment, that's why we've started in Iowa. We're still in Iowa because we feel the business environment environment is positive in Iowa. Our community, Garner, Iowa, has been very helpful for us from a taxation standpoint, helping us when we needed, bonding power to help us with issues. From a general taxation standpoint, as long as we're competitive with surrounding states, I feel we're in good shape. That's where we feel in tax.
Well, as a business owner, we will take any decrease in taxes. However, I do think the state of Iowa does do a very good job with the programs that they offer through DMAC and through some of the training reimbursements. And they've done a great job at publicizing the STEM programs. I know we go to a lot of career fairs at different high schools and community colleges, and I think as they continue that focus on the STEM, that's going to help in the long term.
So I moved back to Iowa, 4 years ago from the Bay Area. So I was an entrepreneur out in the Bay Area. And I think one of the things that we probably don't do that well in Iowa is that appreciate what we really have, right? It's always the grass is greener on the other side, so wherever you are, it seems to be greener on the other side. But Iowa has so many advantages, right? Cost of living, in fact, actually the education says those are a lot of things that we need to continue to keep up because those are things we probably take for granted here. But if you live somewhere else, you realize that that's not the way it is. So I lived in Boston, I lived in Phoenix, lived in Atlanta, lived in Iowa the longest as far as I used to run technology for Wells Fargo Home Mortgage back in the day. But when you start visiting these other places that are sort of hot and all that kind of stuff, you realize that we really have huge advantages here. We just don't necessarily always take that into consideration and look at it that way.
Bill, one of the areas we wanted to be sure to talk about is along your expertise with startups, and what would you say is the appetite for entrepreneurs to really get into manufacturing type of startups, and how difficult is that in Iowa these days? If you maybe give us a little insight on that.
Sure. A couple comments around that. So actually, even Chris talked about, how do you draw some of these people in? If you look at even like the cool technologies that people talk about, the trends, right? The key is, where do you apply those, right? And so if you start looking at where the applications of those are, manufacturing is one of the core places where you implement those, right? So let's say you want to get into, augmented reality, virtual reality. Where do you do that? Manufacturing is a great place. AI, people talk about AI. It's great. There's one Google that they can do AI stuff at Google. Where's the rest of the AI people do it, right? Manufacturing, once again, a great place to do that. So to me, there are a lot of opportunities. So blockchain's another one. Everyone talks about blockchain and Bitcoin, but where are the true practical applications of Bitcoin? It's basically inside manufacturing, underside suppliers, as well as the entire supply chain, right? So if you look at, that's where I see the opportunity. That's where that innovation comes in, is that it's great that there's a Google. If you can go work for Google and Apple, that's great. You can go innovate with them. But if you're not, and you want to work with these kind of technologies, right, where do you go? And the manufacturing sector is, to me, is prime when it comes to that.
Any follow-ups from the audience on that area, or?
Well, it's maybe a question. I talked a little bit about training today. Skills are very competitive with manufacturing, rapidly changing environment. It's going to take a whole different set of skills to so maybe what strategies do you have on upscaling existing employees to be able to function manufacturing as well?
We're investing quite a bit in automation. Right now, we've got equipment, over about $6 million of equipment being installed in our factories to put more automation into our work, because if people are hard to find to do the manual work, we can find machinery to help us do that more efficiently. But now that also means that the people we're having to get to acquire to run that equipment have to be much more highly trained. And that's where getting the younger people coming out of high school, they've had a laptop to carry around with them through high school, whatnot. They're used to doing things digitally on computers, and we're finding out that those skills are very applicable to running equipment, whether it be a laser or a CNC machine or whatever type of equipment we're putting in their operation. So that's going to be a change in some of our training in the future.
I know that your question was about the future, even moving forward. I would say one big change that's already happened is something Dave alluded to, and not these two manufacturers, but some manufacturers for too long complained about the school system and said, oh, they're not teaching kids what we need them to learn, so they'll come to work and be good workers in our facility, and they maybe for too long were a little lazy about that. But boy, I think manufacturers all across the state now know that they need to be a part of working with their local school district, and they need to be much more proactive with their employees. You mentioned, Dave, getting them in the door and training them. There's a company here in town called Keystone Electrical Manufacturing Company, and they have something they kind of jokingly call Keystone College, where they get any employee in, they train them on exactly what they need to know, and it could be a certain process on a line. It could be something related to something that's not as directly tied to the manufacturing process, but much more proactive about training the people and the investing in training for their employees than they used to be.
I agree with the training internally. Being a manufacturer of 1,200 employees, we have a variety of skill sets, from non-skilled, blue-collar, white-collar, professional. We try to promote from within. We offer the tuition reimbursements. We do many on-the-job trainings, offering them the freedom. If they want to be a welder and they want to move to tool and die, or they want to go into automation and robotics, we offer them a pathway to do so if they're dedicated to see it through.
And I think adding on to that, I mean, what I've seen in a couple of the ones that I work with is it's actually a nice opportunity. Just think, if you're there and you have those capabilities, and now we're bringing in a robotic machine, heck yeah, it's a career advancement opportunity. It's a career enhancement opportunity, right, in terms of what your skill sets are and what you're doing. And so of the ones that, since ours is more in rural Iowa, the ones that I'm on the board, those opportunities have been huge because they've selected sort of people internally and been able to give them even more job satisfaction in keeping them there, right? So I don't want to say they were underemployed, but basically they got excited about those different opportunities and were able to go work into those roles. And the only reason I know is, as a board, you're walking through the shop floor and they go, oh, I got to introduce you to so-and-so. So they're excited about that.
I guess I'd add the other thing that's important. So we talked about technical skills, but also increasing importance of soft skills like critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, that kind of augment the technical skills as well. I think as you eliminate more of the manual routine jobs, I think people will be forced into more of the soft skills.
We did a power breakfast about AI and automation, and one of the panelists, Tej Dovin, he talked about, somebody asked a question about what skills, and he echoed that and said he would encourage people to go back and get philosophy degrees. So, and that used to be the joke, right? And you're going to go to college and get a philosophy degree. So, Bill, I want to go back to the startup question that Joe was asking. Do you see an appetite for folks starting businesses within manufacturing?
I think there's a lot of product people, right? So if manufacturing, you're doing it for a certain thing, right? And it's usually there's products involved, right? So to me, a lot of times maybe they don't sit there and say, hey, I want to become a manufacturer. A lot of startups aren't sitting there going, yeah, do you know what? I'd really like to be a manufacturer. They're thinking about product. And then they get a customer and then they say, hey, now how do I build these? Because one of the things you got to think about as a business, if there's only 2 people that want it, you're just a one-off job shop or something, right? Now, if you want to create thousands and thousands or even more, now you got to start thinking about it. So manufacturing always becomes that scaling point, right? Of now I want to take this to market. I can, deliver a bunch of these. So like I'm working with one that's a biocell like battery that's actually biodegradable, flexible, and it's cool for the environment because 97% of our batteries are thrown in the garbage today, and the lithium is not good for the environment, blah, 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 right? But if you look at it, so it starts off cool as this, oh, this is a battery thing. Okay, they're going to have to produce, millions of these, right, if it really gets to market. So how do they do that? That's a manufacturing company. It's got to become a skill set, right? So that's where I think the opportunities are. So to me, a lot of them come in as product because they're trying to solve a pain point out of the market. But then the whole question becomes, are you creating a scalable business? If so, manufacturing becomes critical in that process.
Do you see existing manufacturers looking at some of those new technologies that might be coming out of the college and saying, can we actually physically manufacture the product?
So I guess I'll get on my soapbox a little bit. I think that's one of the huge opportunities that I see for existing manufacturers and startups and universities to collaborate more, right? So once again, I didn't know the university environment very well until I showed up 4 years ago, okay? And I never worked with the university, never considered as a business person to work with the university, but having been there now, there's a lot of talented people that don't reach out, right? So if you come in there and you want expertise, like tomorrow, we're meeting with 4 different professors. I'm bringing different companies in to go talk to them. But it's sort of like, I mean, hopefully I don't offend anybody. I typically do on these kind of things. But it's like getting free consulting from experts, right? And if you could then create a project, then they love it because you can actually do sponsored projects that are much cheaper than if I hired a consultant externally, right? So that's a resource that I see is under-tapped here, right? The other one is startups. So if you look at the Bay Area, everyone talks about startups, but if you notice that there are big companies like Google that are there, Microsoft that are there, Intel that's there. Why are they there? Is it because labor's cheap? No. Why are they there? They're there because it's an innovation environment where existing companies work with startups. Startups have more nimbleness. They can do different kind of things. You know, so the key is buying companies, selling companies, spinning off different IP, starting up business units. Those are all part of this innovation kind of economy kind of thing, which I'd like to see more from a manufacturing base, you know, companies like this that really sit there and say, hey, we'd like to participate. We'd like to invest in, you know, some of those kind of things. So that, I think that's a big opportunity for us in the future.
Yeah, Creighton.
Kelly, you said something very interesting earlier about DIY toolboxes, and whether that's a cost because of tariff, a cost because of labor. Is there a potential of DIY manufacturing on products being sent to the end user, but not quite completely all put together?
Well, our goal for coming out with that product was a twofold. Number one, to attract to the young people who wanted to do the DIY, but also to put a toolbox that's not normally shippable via UPS or FedEx into a packaging that could be sold on Amazon. So that was the goal for that product in our organization.
More questions? I think I saw another one over here. Yeah.
There's been some articles here, especially this week, talking about foreign investments and repatriation of dollars back to the United States because of taxation issues in the United States and other places of investment this year in particular. And in the articles that I've read, it talks about Iowa being a little bit behind the curve in terms of our share of those repatriated dollars and for foreign investments into our manufacturing and other types of businesses. Do you see anything on the horizon that relates to this? Where we are, because we're doing partnerships for one of our articles that I read, indicating that one is concerned that we're behind the curve on this issue. So looking at the future, where are we really going here in terms of looking at taking advantage of those opportunities to flow of money that can actually help address manufacturing issues?
That is a good question, Mark. There's been some discussion of it. I was not aware that Iowa was sort of behind the curve, so I'm learning something, but I have a lot to learn. So, yeah, well, thank you. I will tell you that there seems to be, just speaking in my own experience, 2 types of business in Iowa when it comes to capital. Those that don't need it and those that do. And the good news for Iowa and most manufacturers in our state, whether they're located in urban areas or rural areas, they're pretty well capitalized. It's the startups that we need to make sure that people like Bill are giving them the help they need. But capital hasn't been an issue for most of the established manufacturers in the state as far as I know. I think we're doing a better job. Bill, you're in a better place to say this is true or not, but I think we're doing a better job with startups because of people like you. And I think about VentureNet Iowa. That's something ABI played a role in starting. And I know Iowa Area Development Group does a lot with startups in rural Iowa. So I think there are a number of initiatives in place to help those folks, but most of the established folks, I think, are pretty well capitalized.
So one of the nice things about being a journalist is when you don't know something, you get to ask a question about it. So repatriation, can you talk about what that is?
Just bringing money back to the United States is really what it is, Chris. It's investment dollars that companies maybe have invested outside, or they've, taken it elsewhere. It's bringing it back into the United States, into the 50 states.
So that's specifically financial investment. Is there, and have you seen any businesses bringing manufacturing back jobs specifically and/or operations back into Iowa here?
I think the Wall Street Journal has another article every day about some company bringing jobs back to the country, and been a number of big companies that have done it, but a number of smaller ones too. And so right now we seem to be riding a repatriation wave in both terms of people and manufacturing processes, and third, money.
Iowa specific, you think?
Well, I'd say U.S. specific and Iowa some.
Yeah.
If you're talking about, there are a lot of global manufacturers in Iowa. Stellar does business all over the world, I know. But when you think about global manufacturers in Iowa, you think about John Deere, Vermeer, Collins Aerospace, those kinds of companies. They're doing it. They have plants all over the world, but they're bringing a ton of stuff back home too. And some of that comes to Iowa.
More questions from the audience? Yeah, Catherine.
No, I think you're on track, and we're spending some time doing that. We're reaching out to those high school kids and their parents and bringing them into our factories and showing them that, we do have a air-conditioned weld shop. The floors are clean. You don't get dirt, filthy, dirty, greasy working in a manufacturing facility. It's a whole different environment than what you think it might be. We're spending more and more time on that. I mentioned earlier about all the people we hired, but after hiring all those people, we said, what are we doing to spend time on retention of our people? Because we spend all this money hiring new people, but what can we do to retain people? And that's become a big focus for us in the last year and a half. And we've done some innovative things. For years, we've had a profit sharing plan. And our profit sharing was always at the end of the year. We'd wait till our audit was done, and we'd see how much profit we had, and we'd cut a check for everybody. And that process from the first month that we started tracking profits till the check was cut was probably about 15 months. So what did those guys do that first month to earn that profit? Well, that was lost. So last July 1st, we switched to a monthly profit sharing. So we track what happens from start of the month to the end of the month, and we pay that check out within 3 weeks of the start of the next month. And now we've actually fine-tuned that a little bit now to where just last month we started going out and having small huddle meetings with our employees in each area. When we pass those checks out, we say, this is what you accomplished last month as a team. This is what enabled you to have this check, or this is what you didn't do to have the check come down a little bit. And one big change we did in changing from the annual to the monthly profit sharing, we put in 2 factors that help people realize how important they are to us as a company. They're allowed to have 1 tardy per month and 1 unexcused absence per month. And if they have more than that, they take themselves out of the bonus program for the month. And the first few months of the program, there were quite a few people that were not getting checks. But I think last month we had a record number of people. We had almost 85, between 85 and 90% people getting checks because they stay within the rules. So things like that, we have to get creative and find things to retain people and make us stand out apart from the other employees in the area.
It's a little more challenging to do some of the latest and greatest trends in employment, such as flexibility or flex time, because you're trying to run a production line. You need 10 people on that line, and you need it to run 3 shifts a day or set times. As far as putting the glamour back in manufacturing, through social media, we are trying to do more videos, more putting it out there on things that the younger generation are looking at and saying, hey, consider this as a career field. There are opportunities here. We've also had to get very creative in our recruiting as far as diversity. We have a very We have a lot of different diversity in our plant floor. In fact, we have about 20 different languages spoken. That in itself creates many challenges as far as putting work instructions in different languages, using pictorials. But if we hadn't done that, we would really be hurting as far as labor shortage. We also did a partnership with DART, where the non-traditional workers who don't drive a car have the ability to ride the bus to 3 of our different plants. We work with a lot of the different places in Iowa, like Bridges of Iowa, to get people who may have a colorful past back into the workforce and learning a skill. I guess I can't think of any more to tell you right now.
Well, that's pretty good right there. Catherine, you're right on target, though. We do a couple things with member companies to help people understand that manufacturing is not the dark and dirty thing it used to be. One is with this Elevate program, a lot of social media there, a lot of video, just like you said, Kelly. The second thing we do is we do an entrepreneurial camp for high school students every summer. 85 to 100 kids come to, this year was Central College. It's kind of funny, they come, and the point of the thing is to make sure they understand that they can have a great career in manufacturing. They come in on Sunday and they don't want to be there, and they want us to know they don't want to be there. You know, some teacher said you should go, or their parent said you should go, but by the end of the week, they understand that manufacturing can be a terrific career, and so we keep trying to do anything we can to help them understand that. Good question.
So one of the companies I work with, they're an ESOP company, so an employee stock ownership plan. I mean, it's 100% employee owned, right? So the whole idea of that, and it's obviously it's not a solution for everybody, but for this specific company, the whole idea is you're competing, right, for the skilled labor or unskilled labor as well. And so the idea is having them have ownership kind of thing in terms of their thing is a competitive advantage that they utilize, which is really cool, right? Because they can look at other jobs that are out there and they pay maybe the same hourly wage or whatever it comes out to. But if they see some of their cohort, especially a lot of the older people who are, let's say, retiring at this point, walk away with something that's pretty significant, that's pretty big, right? And so that's been a pretty big deal for this company in terms of growing, right? In terms of retaining people, hiring people, and in fact, even acquiring companies to move into 100% employee stock ownership plan companies.
So I think just some national statistics. So again, that 2.4 million job gap in manufacturing, a lot of that's going to come from baby boomers retiring and those jobs not being filled. So I think all that these companies are doing to encourage young people to move into manufacturing is a really good thing.
Any other best practices, well, let's go ahead and take your question.
Before they answer, Mike, do you know a banker that can help them get some capital?
No, we're in the process of investing quite a bit this year. We have a small factory out in Nebraska. We put the first laser cutting machine out there this summer. We're putting in a fully automated panel bending and cutting line in one of our factories in Garner. That's about a $2.8 million investment. We've got 2 more welding robots that are coming online, and those will be fed by another laser cutting machine. So we're putting in a lot of automation this year, just because it's needed. You know, we've building some of our cranes. Over the last 5 years, we've become the largest manufacturer of telescopic service cranes in the nation, and we just can't keep up doing the old processes we did before. So we've got some contract manufacturers around the Midwest that have helped us out to augment that, but at a cost. So now we're bringing that fabrication work in-house and using automation as much as possible to do it in-house. So yeah, it's it's changing things all around.
I think to stay current, you have to reinvest back into your company. Over the last 10 years, we have put millions of dollars back into the technology on the production floor. We have a number of different robotic cells, 3 different robotic welders for tanks and toolboxes. We have 7 different robotics cells for running boards, both the fabrication and the assembly. If money was no option, I'd love to see more collaborative robots on the floor. By collaborative, I mean those who can work side by side, right beside the human. As far as some of our automation, they have to be in cells where if a human enters that vicinity of the robot arm, it stops. So if capital wasn't an issue, I'd love to see a lot more collaborative robots.
Technology is out there, kind of where I was going, but in this case, you still have to, employ it in a practical way.
And you have to have the people with the skill set to keep that automation or those robots running.
When we talk about automation, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what some of the longer-term effects you see of, if we push the time window out 5-10 years, what type of effects you're going to see within your businesses?
So one of the companies I work with, they basically build ambulances, right? So one of the things that automation has done was that each of these ambulances, believe it or not, they're sort of customized. It's all like built to order, right? So then how does that work with automation? What it turns out is if you can create standardized parts that you can then assemble in more customized ways. So that's where those robotic welders came into this operation, because they're probably lagging behind what these guys do here, is because they don't do that kind of thing. It was all custom. Then they got them in there, and then they found out that if we can create these 3 variations, we can build anything from these variations. And that's where that automation now allowed them to do sort of mass customization, which is what they're trying to do. So they can sort of lower the cost with the automation, but still do then even more customization. So now they're thinking, well, I think they're doing some more crazier customization, so maybe they shouldn't go as far as what they're thinking. But I think that opens up a whole different realm for them, because they're basically lowering the cost over here and now can actually spend more time on the customization parts of it and integrating new technologies over here in terms of the end delivery. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the trucks we build are very much like the ambulance type trucks. I mean, there's a standard package, standard base, but there's lots of customization that's done all around that. So, as our volume increases, we can justify more robotics, more technology, but we're just waiting to build the market up so we can justify those expenses.
From an employment standpoint, it would be interesting too to.
I think there's a lot of concern. You see a lot of news articles about automation taking all of our jobs, and that could also be the case in manufacturing. But I think automation will actually lead to more jobs. Okay. Automation will actually lead to more jobs. So the World Economic Forum said that automation by 2022, so not that far along from now, will create 58 more million jobs globally than it displaces. So I don't think robots are coming for our jobs. And I think that's definitely the case in manufacturing. It's just moving to more of those non-routine jobs, more skilled jobs, and also more of the soft skills, creative thinking and problem solving.
More questions from the audience? Yeah.
Well, yeah, that Apex program is a fabulous program, Mark. Part of its demographics in Waukee, it's a pretty professional community, so they do think about four-year degrees right away. A lot of Iowa school districts, not quite that way, but it's all part of the problem of we've got to let students and their parents know that these are not only satisfying careers, they can be very rewarding financially and satisfaction-wise too. Again, I'll keep coming back to our Elevate program. We do Parents' Nights events where it's great if the students if they come along too, but really we're after the parents because we need them to understand that these are great careers. And we do those all over the state, and it's sort of amazing. It's sort of a microcosm of this high school camp I told you about. The parents come in and, a lot of times they think, well, this probably isn't for my kid. By the time they leave, they think, yeah, you know what, there are some things that would be a great career for our kids. So we got to do everything we can to get that message out.
At a forum that I went to for higher education not long ago, it really stuck in my mind that I think it was St. Teresa's School has been sending kids as young as I think fourth grade and maybe even younger to visit Accumold and Ankeny, and really increasing that exposure to for kids at a much earlier age, and maybe that's what it takes.
We're really on the forefront of trying to reach out to younger people.
Yeah, no, there's so many other people with questions, so. Bill, maybe that was towards you.
I mean, I would say yes, partially just because, specifically Silicon Valley. I mean, I know a lot of investors in Silicon Valley, but they're all software oriented, right? Not all, most. Okay, that's where they grew up. That's what they made. I mean, there are some hardware stuff, but a lot of the hardware stuff there aren't application hardware. It's more silicon based. It's all that sort of high tech, the other side, right? And so, yeah, I think there are a lot of opportunities to how do you marry up the software with the hardware components. But one place where I think it connects up with manufacturers and in any business is that, people come to me all the time and say, Bill, I want to raise capital. I say, great. The best way to raise capital is to get customers. I don't know if you guys know that. That's what I always tell people. It's like, go get a freaking customer, and I can put you in front of an investor because it's a validation of what you're doing, right? And then customers are businesses like manufacturers. It's pulling the whole business concept together, not just that initial value prop, right? And so if you can do that, it's a heck of a lot easier. And you guys are nodding your heads because it makes logical sense, right? But for some reason on the entrepreneur front, it's not like that. It's like, I got a great idea, I got to go raise capital. And it's like, maybe you should find out whether it's, somebody wants the damn thing, right? And if you have a customer that says yes, and now you have a manufacturer that can build it, now go to an investor and say, here's what we're doing. Yes, it's a device, but here's why these people need it, and they have an order in place. Here's who can build it, right? And they can build other kind of parts already, so they can build this. And now I have a chance to raise capital. So to me, the key to making that happen is connecting all those dots, though. Because if it's just entrepreneurs and investors, then we sort of miss out. And I think that's the piece that if we can come together, that's where the opportunity is. Because I don't think anyone does that well right now.
Does maybe there is something that exists like this, but obviously we've got the agri-tech accelerator and the insurance accelerator. Is there anything in the manufacturing realm right now that, or anything in the works potentially to try to do something like that here in Iowa?
Well, I think there are a couple things. One, what Bill does is a big part of that, but Two things I'd say. Center for Industrial Research and Service at Iowa State University, I'll put a plug in for those guys. I mean, you've got an entrepreneur running the startup factory at Iowa State, that's pretty good. You've got an aerospace engineer running Cirrus. They do a great job of helping beginning manufacturers, all kinds of manufacturers. When it comes to capital, I'll speak for the guys like VentureNet Iowa and Renew Rural Iowa again. So I don't know that we have the concentration of resources that exist in like the Ag Accelerator or the Insurance Accelerator, but we have the resources. Maybe we need to do a better job of making sure people are connected to them. That's a great idea. Maybe we should. Let's look at it.
That wouldn't be bad. I mean,
I'm making a note right now.
So Maple Ventures does a little bit of that kind of stuff, but the other part is, I think, the other things are to leverage the resources that are available to you. So Cirrus, as was mentioned, I guess, that's a good resource. The other is, like, at Iowa State, there's capstone projects. So if you want something built, I mean, if I can bring Dave along, right, and say, okay, here's my idea, and I don't need any capital from you, Dave, but I want some of your expertise, and let's go work with a capstone team, which is basically a capstone team is a senior engineering team, and they're looking for more projects, because the last thing at capstone, being an engineering person myself, the last thing you want is something that your professor makes up, just because you have to do something. You want to do something real. So if you have something that's kind of interesting, you bring in some expertise on the manufacturing side, and you say, here's the project, right? So in 1 semester or 2 semesters, they build, and it's not going to be a production-ready device or machine, but it's a prototype that now you can utilize to say, here's what it is. Does it actually do what we think it's going to do, right? So we've had several of those projects, but I see those as underutilized. I mean, some large companies come in, like Deere has a whole bunch of, capstone projects, because they've figured out this is a great way to A, recruit people, right, because they're working on your stuff, and B, maybe some cool stuff comes from it, right? We've had some other companies that what they do is they have a priority list. So these are the top 10, and we're going to do these internally, but number 11, 12, and 13, we're not going to do, but hey, let's stick some students on it, what the heck, and see what they come up with, right? So there are alternative kind of ways that I think we need to be some creative in terms of that, but it'd be great to have a manufacturing accelerator. I'm going to think about that one.
We're getting close to the end of our time today, and one of the things that, I think that I continue to learn is that there's so many innovative things and cool things happening within manufacturing. So I think what would be really interesting is just go down the line real quick and maybe think about one of the, maybe the most innovative thing you've seen in manufacturing. It doesn't necessarily have to be your business, but it could be something externally too.
I just think the most exciting thing we see in our industry is the melding of metal and hydraulics and steel, and now with electronics and tying into the computers of the trucks we're working with, GPS that's active on the trucks. It's basically it's a rolling workshop that used to be bricks and mortar. Now it's a truck, and then that truck does everything that brick and mortar facility did 10 years ago, and that's what our customers want. So we're getting out there and trying to partner with other companies that have that expertise in the software side of things and the technology side of things to bring all that information, all those services into our trucks, so we provide the customers what they're looking for. That's been pretty exciting to us.
I think Dwayne's telling us our time's up, Chris. I don't know, but I'll tell you, I'm really excited by the innovation, not only in some of the machines and the work that's done, but the processes. I mentioned the two companies that are sharing an employee and the various processes on the manufacturing line. Iowa manufacturers are innovative, and it's great to see that innovation take place. It's exciting to see it.
Manufacturers are bringing those companies together to brainstorm, come up with the best ways to address some of the issues. Even though we're all competing for some of the same employees, there's a lot of groups out there through HR, through technology, through engineering, where we're also coming together to discuss who has capacity in this area or this capability, and how can we work together to solve it.
So I'll go a different direction, I guess. One is, as a tech guy, I'm very curious to see, this is what intrigues me about sort of the future. What does Internet of Things, right, specifically IoT sensors, along with 5G, so everything is connected, and all the data that's going to provide, how do we utilize that to create sort of the future, right? And I think it's going to impact manufacturing like we can't see at this point, right? And to me, that's the fascinating part, because I think that if you look at innovation in manufacturing in the United States, I think that's going to take us the leap forward beyond sort of our other competitors, because it's not going to be about low labor costs. It's going to be about who can actually optimize those kind of variables the best. And if that's the case, but I don't know. It just blows my mind as I think about it, right? It's one of those.
I guess for me, coming from a statistics and perspective, manufacturing coming back to the U.S. The U.S., we had the China shock after China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001. We lost between 1998 and 2010 over 6 million manufacturing jobs. But manufacturing has come back. We've added 1.2 million manufacturing jobs in this expansion, but manufacturing jobs are different. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how advanced analytics, Internet of Things, and how automation changes the types of manufacturing jobs in the United States.
If the things you produced were always able to continue talking to you after they left your manufacturing shop, I imagine that would be a lot of data that could either allow you to improve those products or figure out how they're actually being used in different ways. So it'd be pretty interesting to see that. What I want to do is just give one last chance to give everybody a chance to make one final closing thought, and then we'll get everybody out of here. So Robin, why don't we start with you, and we'll work our way back down this way.
I guess I talked about manufacturing coming back to the U.S. I think that China is losing its competitive edge. I think if you look at overall costs of producing things, China's considerably lost their edge, and I think that's part of the reason why manufacturing is coming back to the U.S.
What's the reason behind that?
So I think wages, even though wages are still really low in China, wages have increased pretty significantly. I think the other thing that's going on, which gives the U.S. as a benefit, energy prices in the U.S. are really low. That gives us a benefit in terms of production costs. So if you look at the overall cost of producing stuff in China versus the U.S., China's advantage has decreased pretty considerably.
I imagine specifically Iowa with wind energy would be a big advantage. Bill?
So just building off of that, I was in China last year, and one of the things I looked at is they're building these future science parks. And so they're investing a lot of money into technology, right? But the problem is their infrastructure doesn't have this innovation kind of thing that we have here, right? So they're trying to move from a labor to an innovation thing, and people here talk about that, but once you get there, these parks are gorgeous, they have lots of equipment, but they don't have people in those that are skilled enough to go make some of those happen. So they're trying to recruit us, right? Those kind of things, which, I don't know. I'm not going to get too political in terms of the comments, but, those are some interesting things. So realize that even though China has some advantages, we have a lot of advantages. Once again, the grass is always greener kind of concept. I think we have what it takes to be the leader in that next phase. Whether we take it or not becomes another question. And so one final thought is that if you're a startup or want to work with startups, please reach out. I'm looking for more people to connect with. So.
I think we just need to continue to emphasize that manufacturing is rewarding job and has rewarding jobs and is not just the dirty environment or that connotation that it used to have. There are a lot of great manufacturing companies here in Iowa, and we need to celebrate that more, publicize it more, help with the school system to the parents and the students on the STEM programs.
I'll take it back to something we talked about in the beginning of this visit, and that's the tariffs. And then we need to remember that the tariffs aren't really as much about manufacturing as they are about intellectual property. And when we can make some progress on that issue, the manufacturing part will come along with it.
I just want to confirm that, Stellar was started in Iowa 29 years ago, and we're very proud to be an Iowa company, and a lot of the innovation and progress we've made over the years would not have been possible, I don't feel, without Iowa people doing that work. So, we see that as the future of our company, and proud to be an Iowa company. And once again, thanks to the Business Record for having this seminar today.
Well, thank you all for coming out today. Again, I really appreciate it. We're in a very fortunate position where our membership is growing. We're reaching more and more people every day. That's something we're really excited about. It's something we're investing into our staff. We're growing our newsroom. We're trying to write more and more about the industries and the things that are going on in the state. And it's only possible because of everybody here in the room that are members of the Business Record and help support us. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. the best things that we do, the best stories that we write always come from the people that are in our audience that are dealing with the challenges and the issues, and when they reach out to our newsroom. We're a newsroom of 5 or 6 people, and we need to have connections into the community to understand what's going on and what you're dealing with in order to write best for the audience. So please feel free to reach out at any time. If you have a story idea, something that you think we should be looking into, something that you think is really cool and interesting we should be sharing with the audience, please feel free to reach out. We'd really appreciate it. And then lastly, can I get a big round of applause for our panelists today? Thank you.